everybody, I'm Sean.
And Cinda.
And we are Cockeyed Optimists, and welcome to another Founding Father...
birthday episode.
Yeah, there we go. Although we might be covering more than just the Founding Fathers, as last time we discussed Abraham Lincoln. But today, of all days, we cover the father of our country. The very first president of the United States of America, Mr. George Washington. And we are in for a bit of a Herculean feat to cover this man and his life. Because I feel like when we were kids, you learn about George Washington. You hear the classic story of him chopping down a cherry tree. I cannot tell a lie. But there's so much about Washington that the both of us have been learning over the course of the last year. That it's like, why didn't I learn any of this stuff? So I feel like...
Actually, I wore this little jacket, which has a button missing that I need to sew back on. But I actually was like, you know what? I'm not going to sew it on before we do this because it's almost in honor of how cool is it that George Washington had literal bullet holes in his jacket and yet lived.
A little bit of housekeeping. How are things going with the recording? Who knows? You have tracked vocals, which is great. So that means that one of the new songs officially has all of its major principal material recorded.
So you gotta mix it now.
Yes, that will be the next stage of the process. I haven't mixed a song of ours in a very long time.
Other than just some acoustic,
Yes.
some things, but yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a very interesting time. Don't forget, if you want any more news on that, head to our website, cockeyeedoptimist.net. Sign up for the email list, and you will be amongst the first to know when this first single in 7 years, is going to drop. So, shall we?
Sure.
George Washington, the father of our country, born this day, or at least according to the new style of dating as opposed to the old style of dating. Boy, that part is confusing. On this day in 1732, which means by 1776 he was in his mid-30s, which is interesting to think about. A lot of youth. I would consider mid-30s relatively young still this day. A lot of youth in the revolutionary American cause, which I certainly enjoy seeing. And he is...
Yeah, it's almost like you think he's like 50.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it just comes from that propensity of men at the time to wear powdered wigs.
Yeah, that is true. That's probably where most of us... We see the picture with the white hair, and so we just assume that everyone, is always minimum over 40.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
Now, first thing I really want to talk about with George is I actually have some really great references to him in this book, this Alexander Hamilton book by Ron Chernow, which I've been reading in research, obviously, for Hamilton. But Hamilton's relationship with Washington was so intimate at different points in his life that there's a lot of great information here that characterizes the man George Washington in a way that I didn't really have a very good understanding of. And I do want to read a couple of them to you because I think it paints a good picture. Washington had attended limited formal schooling, never attended college, and had trained as a surveyor of land in his adolescence. Very much another story of a minimally educated young person that grew to be one of the most influential people in all of history. This is
I'm sensing a theme in our Founding Fathers.
This is very much a theme. So, he marries Martha in his mid-20s, and sadly, though he's designated as the father of our country, he himself never had children with Martha, which actually is something that then I feel relates to how he treats many of the young men that served under him during the Revolutionary War. He did have stepchildren. Martha was previously married and widowed from her first husband, and he raised two of her children as his own stepchildren. And over the course of his life, he also raised grandchildren in his home and various nieces and nephews, and very much was involved in their lives and in seeing to it that they got educated. But I did reference the fact that his father's heart extended to a lot of the young men that served under him during the Revolutionary War, Alexander Hamilton being one of them. In the book, I'll read directly from it. Perhaps from unfulfilled paternal instincts, Washington had several surrogate sons during the Revolution, most notably the Marquis de Lafayette, and he often referred to Hamilton as my boy. So great was this fatherly influence that the Marquis de Lafayette had one son, which he named George Washington de Lafayette. I think a lot of men that end up not being fathers tend to harbor a sort of paternal instinct that they then give to young men that they see potential in. And it was very clear that Washington saw lots of potential in not just the people that were his closest confidants, but even those that were serving under him. Now, on the flip side of his father's heart, there's also his emotions. We tend to look at George Washington as the quiet man from Virginia, and a lot of popular media portrays him in that fashion. However, just like somebody else in this room, he was known to fits of rage. There's one particular episode during the war. On June 28, 1778, he was working with a General Charles Lee on a specific operation to take the Redcoat Army. And Charles Lee and Washington did not always see eye to eye. And in the process of this operation, General Lee decided not to go along with Washington's plan and have him and his men retreat. Washington did not take to that very well. From the Hamilton book, Washington did not ordinarily use profanities, but faced with Lee's insubordination that morning, he, quote, swore till the leaves shook on the trees. Now, I don't know if that defines rage well enough, but I think it does. So
I would like to see a voice actually literally shaking leaves on the tree. That's quite interesting.
And for those of you wondering what the profanity was, he was quoted as saying, "You damned poltroon, you never tried them."
Meaning you never tried the plans, the ideas that Washington had for the mission?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah, and the profanity being damned and poltroon, I suppose. I don't know what poltroon means, but man, back in the day, cursing was so much more eloquent. But yeah, he was not entirely a always composed man. Now, one other thing I want to bring up. This shows a more emotional depth of George Washington, specifically related to Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold, of course, we know, being the consummate, the synonymous person with traitorous acts. It's important to note that Benedict Arnold was, at one time, a very ardent supporter of the revolutionary cause and his service in the military. And he was greatly loved by the soldiers that served alongside of him, and very heavily trusted by Washington and his close circle. Late in the afternoon, Washington returned to the house befuddled by Arnold's absence from West Point and its negligent defenses. Hamilton gave Washington a thick packet of dispatches, including papers discovered on the capture of, quote, John Anderson. Hamilton then went off to confer with Lafayette. When the two men returned, they found their usually composed commander, Washington, fighting back tears. Quote, "Arnold has betrayed us," Washington said with profound emotion. Quote, "Whom can we trust now?" So great was his trust of Benedict Arnold that Arnold's betrayal brought tears to the normally composed George Washington.
Something that last week we did touch upon, but we didn't bring it up in any sort of elongated way, is how Lincoln really protected the Union and kept the Union together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that most of our founding fathers were actually very much of this opinion, that the Union is the only thing that will work. Any kind of factions and separatists, rebellions, whatever, they were all very against. Washington said in his farewell address, with such powerful and obvious motives to union, affecting all parts of our country, while experience shall not have demonstrated its impracticability, there will always be reason to distrust the patriotisms of those who any quarter may endeavor to weaken its bands. Whence designing men may endeavor to excite a belief that there is a real difference of local interests and views. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. Another quote says, "The unity of government which constitutes you one people is also now dear to you, as this is the point in your political fortress against the batteries of internal and external enemies will most constantly and actively, though covertly and insidiously directed, is an infinite moment that you should properly estimate the immense value of your national union to your collective and individual happiness." He directly paired the union with your individual happiness.
Mm-hmm. It's sort of a roundabout way of saying you got to believe in something. You got to believe in this union, this American cause.
This American experiment.
Yeah. You have to believe in it, and by believing in it and striving for the ideal, it will breed a certain satisfaction and happiness of life that will eventually pervade.
And endure. You know how we always refer to it as the American experiment?
Mm-hmm.
He even refers to it as an experiment. So it's not like it just came up out of the blue. Sometime randomly in history, someone said, "Oh, it is an American experiment." It literally says, "It is well worth a fair and full experiment."
Now, about his presidency, obviously we know he was the first president of the United States of America and stands as the first and the only president to ever be unanimously elected to the office not once, but twice. That is a true feat. But based off the reputation that he builds, it's only logical to see why that was the case. He was the hero of the revolution, the leader of the army that saved us from British oppression. So the people voting no doubt saw that he was a great leader. Even though he had his detractors during the war, even some detractors who were serving directly underneath him, he was viewed as a great leader. And after his 2 terms, he left office. He could have stayed on longer, but he chose to leave office. Because at that point, there were no term limits for president. I want to make that very clear. That is a more modern thing that has happened.
He explicitly turns down their salary.
Yes.
He's like, "No, I'm not going to take a salary. Obviously, there will be expenses in the executive branch, and so you charge them, you pay them for what, but I'm not taking a salary."
Yeah. So.
And that shows another element of his character.
Yeah.
He was
a servant.
A servant.
Yeah, truly. And of course, like every person, sadly, December 14th, 1799, he passes away due to a combination, in my opinion, of a throat infection, which impaired his ability to breathe, and severe amounts of bloodletting, which of course was a popular medical practice in the day. Apparently at one point them letting almost 5 pints of blood from his body. Not a good idea. But he left behind a really big legacy. Obviously, there are some interesting parts of it. Of course, being from Virginia and coming into land in Mount Vernon and also Martha's estate. At one point, he did own slaves. I don't think that's any secret these days that a lot of founding fathers, especially in the southern parts of the colonies, did at one point own slaves. So it may interest people to know that over the course of his life, it went from a sort of begrudging acceptance of it purely because he received them as sort of an inheritance to eventual very heavy regret, to the point that in his will he stipulated the release of his slaves. And Martha actually went to great lengths to ensure that the slaves that he was able to release actually got released, and she endeavored to release other slaves in their possession as well. So it's just a really interesting example of someone can start their life thinking one way and eventually realizing, and he ascribed it to his revolutionary beliefs in the belief of natural law and natural God-given rights, that this was wrong. The institution of slavery was wrong. And so it is possible, people, for you to start one way and end your life another. It's just all of a learning process of the years that we live and the things that we take in. And so with that, I want to end on a very interesting note, specifically related to the God-given rights thing. Washington did not hide his reliance on God. While many of his fellow compatriots in the Revolution would have considered themselves to be deists, Washington was considered to be an active Anglican, going to church relatively regularly, though obviously due to his military service, not like he was a every week attender. But he was also known to have seen at many points during the war going off into a secluded area and finding a quiet place where he could kneel down on the ground and pray. And many proclamations, including one after the Revolutionary War, effectively established Thanksgiving well before Thanksgiving was the thing.
Maybe we'll have to have Sean do a dramatic reading of that on Thanksgiving, because it's really cool.
And so that really, to me, shows that there was a faith in his life. Now, he did not... A lot of people love to debate because he didn't use sort of Christ-centered language in a lot of his communication when it came to religion. But just because publicly he doesn't utilize the language, I think we can say as Christians, there's a lot of churchy terminology that people would be considered laymen in the subject, they don't understand. So you don't start people in the deep end, you start them in the shallow end.
Well, I was just thinking about this line from his farewell address. Well, actually contradicts that idea.
Well, here we go.
Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And let us indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. So he's actually saying, yeah, you can't really be moral if you don't have a religion, because what are you going off of? So I just,
Yeah, that's an interesting point to bring up. And with that, we get into one of the most interesting aspects to me of Washington's walk in faith, and that is the infamous Valley Forge vision.
So infamous, though, you may have never heard of it.
Yes, and so infamous that many people even consider it to not be real, to consider it a fabrication, a creative work. Now, I want to caveat before we get into this, I have done the work in looking into the Valley Forge vision. I have read the positions for it, and I have read the positions against it. This is why I believe the Valley Forge vision to be a true work. Number one, despite its first publication being around the time of the Civil War, why did the person writing it not choose it to be a vision of Lincoln? Why would you not apply it to something?
For the context you need right now at the moment.
For the context you need right now at the moment. Two, it actually goes along with Washington's propensity to go off on his own and pray. A lot of people will say that while they're praying, they receive some sort of divine revelation, whether that's direction for their life or feel like they receive guidance in just every day. They receive something from the divine realm that then gives them the strength to move on. The imagery in the vision is too spot on. But at the very same time, it is too vague. It is specific and vague at the same time, which feels like real prophecy that you read in the Bible. Biblical prophecy is often very specific, but very vague.
We're not going to read it all, but basically at the beginning of it, the person who is recounting it says that Washington was all alone and he requested specifically to be alone, not interrupted while he's working on some dispatches, and he actually sees the vision of an angel. And then Sean's going to pick it up here.
Here we go. Presently, I heard a voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn," while at the same time my visitor extended her arm eastwardly. I now beheld a heavy white vapor at some distance rising fold upon fold. This gradually dissipated, and I looked upon a strange scene. Before me lay spread out in one vast plain all the countries of the world: Europe, Asia, Africa, and America. I saw rolling and tossing between Europe and America the billows of the Atlantic, and between Asia and America lay the Pacific. "Son of the Republic," said the same mysterious voice as before, "look and learn." At that moment I beheld a dark, shadowy being, like an angel, standing, or rather floating in mid-air between Europe and America. Dipping water out of the ocean in the hollow of each hand, he sprinkled some upon America with his right hand, while with his left hand he cast some on Europe. Immediately a cloud raised from these countries and joined in mid-ocean. For a while it remained stationary, and then moved forward slightly westward, until it enveloped America in its murky folds. Sharp flashes of lightning gleamed through it at intervals, and I heard the smothered groans and cries of the American people. A second time the angel dipped water from the ocean and sprinkled it out as before. The dark cloud was then drawn back to the ocean, in whose heaving billow it sank from view. A third time I heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." I cast my eyes upon America and beheld villages and towns and cities springing up, one after another, until the whole land from Atlantic to Pacific was dotted with them. Again I heard the mysterious voice say, "Son of the Republic, the end of the century cometh. Look and learn." At this the dark shadowy angel turned his face southward, and from Africa I saw an ill-omened spectre approach our land. It flitted slowly over every town and city of the latter. The inhabitants presently set themselves in battle array against each other. As I continued, I saw a bright angel, on whose brow rested a crown of light, on which was traced the word Union, bearing the American flag, which he placed between the divided nation, and said, "Remember, ye are brethren." Instantly the inhabitants, casting from them their weapons, became friends once more, and united around the national standard. And again I heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." At this, the dark, shadowy angel placed a trumpet to his mouth and blew 3 distinct blasts, and taking water from the ocean, he sprinkled it upon Europe, Asia, and Africa. Then my eyes beheld a fearful scene. From each of these countries arose thick, black clouds that were soon joined into one, and throughout this mass there gleamed a dark, red light, by which I saw hordes of armed men, who, moving with the cloud, marched by land and sailed by sea to America, which country was enveloped in the volume of cloud. And I dimly saw these vast armies devastate the whole country, and burn the villages, towns, and cities that I beheld springing up. As my ears listened to the thundering of the cannon, the clashing of swords, and the shouts and cries of millions in mortal combat, I again heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." When the voice had ceased, the dark, shadowy angel placed his trumpet once more to his mouth, and blew a long and fearful blast. Instantly a light of 1,000 suns shone down from above me, and pierced and broke into fragments the dark cloud which enveloped America. At the same moment, the angel upon whose head still shone the word Union, and who bore our national flag in one hand and a sword in the other, descended from the heavens, attended by legions of white spirits. These immediately joined the inhabitants of America, who I perceived were well nigh overcome, but who immediately, taking courage again, closed up their broken ranks, and renewed the battle. Again, amongst the noise of the fearful conflict, I heard the mysterious voice saying, "Son of the Republic, look and learn." As the voice ceased, the shadowy angel, for the last time, dipped water from the ocean and sprinkled it upon America. Instantly, the dark cloud rolled back, together with the armies it had brought, leaving the inhabitants of the land victorious. Then once more I beheld the villages, towns, and cities springing up where I had seen them before, while the bright angel, planting the azure standard he had brought in the midst of them, cried with a loud voice, "While the stars remain and the heavens send down dew upon the earth, so long shall the Union last." And taking from his brow the crown on which was emblazoned the word Union, he placed it upon the standard, while the people kneeling down said, "Amen." The scene instantly began to fade and dissolve, and at last I saw nothing but the rising, curling vapor I had at first beheld. This also disappearing, I found myself once more gazing upon the mysterious visitor, who in the same voice I had heard before said, "Son of the Republic, what you have seen is thus interpreted. 3 great perils will come upon the Republic. The most fearful is the third. But in this greatest conflict the whole world united shall not prevail against her. Let every child of the Republic learn to live for his God, his land, and his Union." With these words the vision vanished, and I started from my seat, and felt that I had seen a vision wherein had been shown me the birth, progress, and destiny of the United States. The birth, the progress, and the destiny of the United States of America. The birth marked by conflict, the progress marked by conflict, which truly did progress. This country made giant leaps.
As we talked about in the last episode with Lincoln, we built the first railroad, the Transcontinental Railway, first of its time during
that war.
The Civil War.
Now we stand at the precipice of a new era where the destiny of America will be decided. This year we celebrate 250 years of this country. It is our generation and the ones to come that will decide the destiny of America. In our lifetime, God willing, we will see the 300th anniversary of this country. It is my duty, my pleasure, and my mission to ensure that the spirit of America does not just rest on this land. The spirit of America, which starts with a founding father and a founding father, is a spirit for all.
How many other countries do you really hear the spirit of that country? You don't really. But the American spirit is a thing, and spirit has a tangible quality to it that most people don't really understand. But in our DNA as Americans, in this American experiment, is the idea of happiness, prosperity, and liberty and justice for all. So wherever you are in the world, take it, grab a hold of it, and bring that American spirit into your country. This country was founded with a founding father and a founding father, George Washington. So we bid him happy birthday.
Happy birthday, George.
George Washington. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this video, and we will see you on the next episode.